The budget has been tabled, and it's now time to get some reactions. What did the FM have for MSMEs and exporters? Has she done enough? To talk about this and more, we have with us today Animesh Saxena, President, PISPIN, Ajay Sahai, Director and CEO, FIEO, and Amrit Mutwani, CMD, Sahasra Electronics. So my first question will remain the same to all of you, and starting with you, Mr. Manwani. What's your first reaction to the budget?
Well, a positive budget in every sense of the word, I would say. Firstly, the government has enhanced expenditure on infrastructure by about 7.5 lakhs crores. So that's a very welcome announcement. That will go a long way in building up the infrastructure for capacity building, particularly in electronics manufacturing. So that's a very welcome announcement. The second announcement was about the Gati Shakti initiative, which will also help reduce the logistics costs, and other disabilities would be eliminated, in my opinion. And the third was that specifically for the ESDM sector, the Honorable Finance Minister had announced that there will be duty rationalization in terms of the components that go into wearables and hearables, as well as smart meters. So all those announcements would definitely help in increasing the domestic manufacturing, both for domestic consumption as well as for exports. Those are my initial reactions.
Staying with exports, Mr. Saib, there were a couple of mentions about, I think one of the key mentions was about the SEZ Act, plus custom duty reduction on various items, and some moves to help exporters as well. Has enough been done?
No, in fact, I entirely agree with that. It's a very forward-looking budget, which equally addresses the concern of the fiscal, social, infrastructure, and digital sector altogether. So far as exports are concerned, the budget address some of the medium to long-term issues facing the exports, and infrastructure is definitely one of them. The focus which has been brought on the logistics will definitely help us to reduce the logistics time and cost, and thereby imparting much competitiveness to exports. We are also very happy that government is looking into now having a new legislation for the special economic zone, keeping into the dynamics of the time also and the challenges which we have faced in the past few years in the SCZ scheme. I feel that the SCZ scheme needs to provide much more flexibility. We have some kind of flexibility available under the manufacturing other operation under the warehousing scheme of the customs, which provides complete flexibility whether you are exporting or whether you are selling in domestic market. I think SCZ is also looking into the same kind of treatment. We need to look into SCZ not an engine of export, but more so an engine of economic activity and employment creation. I'm pretty sure when the new legislation will be adopted, a lot of administrative changes will also happen. And it's good that custom is also talking about now the digital monitoring of the SCZ scheme and focus on the risk-based perception, which is the way forward for the SCZ also. Coming back to the exports, I think some of the sector would be happy because some of the key inputs required for marine sector, gems and jewelry, engineering, and chemicals have been reduced, and it will provide much support to these sectors. We are very happy that the government has extended the emergency credit link guarantee scheme, because this is a scheme which is providing collateral-free credit. Today, the biggest challenge which export sector is facing that the demand for credit has gone up, and so is the time period for the credit, because cost of the most of the inputs have gone, freight costs are at record high, and we are also seeing logistic disruption happening. Now, in today's scenario, we are facing a situation where the quality of collateral has also deteriorated over a period of time, and therefore industry is not in a position to provide additional collateral. And from that perspective, extension of ECLGS scheme will come quite handy. It's very good that for MSME, they are providing an additional allocation of 2 lakhs crore. The scheme has helped the business a lot. I'm pretty sure this will also continue to help the export and MSME segment in particular in next few years or so.
Right. Mr. Saxena, if I can come to you, what are your initial thoughts on the budget?
We'll start with this well-meaning plans and a lot of digital push. And as my previous speakers has said, a lot of spending on the infrastructure and this logistics and Gati Shakti, it will definitely spur the economy, and all the sectors will be benefited. We are very excited for MSME for few things. One, this public procurement, they have made almost paperless, the e-billing and e-payment. Because the public procurement, where a lot of MSMEs are involved, we were facing a lot of issues, constraints, and hassles. So this will bring a big relief to MSME if the government can do this. Second is we heard about this ramp. The government has brought in a scheme raising and accelerating MSME performance, and 6,000 crores has been allocated. Whatever little information we could get from this, it is probably streamlining and improving the performance on the payment side, on the procurement side, and the quality. So everything related to MSME. So these two will be a game changer for MSMEs, which we feel. And as Mr. Sahai said, the extension of the emergency credit line scheme, that will be a big relief. The only disappointment which we felt that the interest subvention has not been announced, which was a big lifeline, because as everything has gone up, raw material costs have gone up, the freight have gone up, the cost of finance is also quite high. And with this subvention, which was available to domestic as well as export sector for MSMEs, that was a big relief for us, which has been taken away and has not been restored. We were expecting it. And one last thing, it was a FISMA's long-standing demand that provide an alternative to the bank guarantees in the public procurement, because a lot of money gets blocked. The government has accepted it, and they are accepting the bonds issued by the insurance companies. The modalities have to be worked out, but it's a big relief. So this is all in a totality. We find it's a progressive budget and well-meaning budget, especially for MSMEs.
Right. A well-meaning budget. Mr. Manwari, we've talked about it in our previous conversations. One area of thrust seems to be skill development. The finance ministry laid out a few initiatives that the government would like to make. Has enough been done?
Yeah, I think actually government has set the ball rolling, and that's the way I would put it. They are realizing, the government realizes that to compete in the world market, we not only need to reskill, upskill our workforce. That is very important, and the government has taken the steps in the right direction through various sector skill councils, which are being supported by NSDC as well as Ministry of Skill Development and Education. I think the government has come out with lots of schemes, and even today, the Honorable Finance Minister emphasized on skilling. So I think enough support has been given on skilling, particularly in our sector, electronic sector, where the need of the hour is skilling, because the technological changes that are taking place in our sector are very, very rapid, and technology obsolescence sets in very quickly. So there's a constant need to keep upskilling our workforce, and also get into those hardcore manufacturing jobs, and encourage people by skilling them to take up the manufacturing jobs.
Right. Mrs. Sawai, if I can come to you, the FM did not give out any sector-specific SOP per se. For example, textiles was looking for some sort of maybe SOPs or incentive. Is that the right approach?
In fact, we are very well aware that now with India graduating out of the $1,000 limit, we have very little elbow room to provide support to some kind of subsidy scheme. The support has to come through a duty neutralization scheme, or you can provide support to entire sector rather than putting it an export per se. So from that perspective, the government has very little choice, and I think for textile sector in particular, the government has already provided much support through the ROCTL scheme. An exception was made when the entire industry was put under the ROT tab. realizing the challenges the Indian textile sector is facing, they've carved out a separate scheme for them to help it out. On the interest equalization, I agree with Vismay Chairman that though of course there is no specific mention of that, but when we are looking into the budget allocation for Department of Commerce, the budget allocation, the revised estimate for the current year has been increased from 1900 crore to 3151 crore. And even for next year to 2022-23, there is provision of 2621 crore. So that gives us the satisfaction that probably the budget allocation has been made and government may be announcing a scheme for interest equalization. I entirely agree with you. This is the single scheme which has helped the MSME the most, and we want continuation of the scheme. So I personally feel that whatever in the given situation was possible has been done by the government, though of course we were also expecting that some kind of encouragement through fiscal or tax incentive may flow to the logistics sector. But since now we have a logistics policy which is also on the unveil, some of these issues may be taken care in the logistics policy.
One area the DFM talked about was, easing compliances. Have you heard enough in the budget on ease of doing business, Mr. Saxena?
Not really. Only thing was interesting that probably the corporate exit will be simplified now. So that we want to see that what simplification government is proposing, because that was a big bottleneck, and especially a lot of MSMEs, they were hesitating to move into a corporate structure because most of the, if you see, I think more than 90% MSMEs are still in the either the proprietorship or the partnership because of the stringent clause for exiting the business in the corporate structure. So if the government simplifies, and government was pushing a lot for MSMEs to move into the corporate structure. So hopefully if this scheme is really simplified, then there will be an interest among the MSMEs to move towards that.
Right. Mr. Mandwani, yesterday the economic survey also talked about how crucial the electronic sector is. According to you, what are the hits and the misses?
Well, the biggest hits, in my opinion, leave aside the budget announcement today, but in the last couple of months, the PLI policies that have been announced by the government, those are big pluses. And recently, at the end of the year, on 30th of December, to be precise, the government announced the India Semiconductor Mission, which is really a big positive for the industry. And once the semiconductor ecosystem develops, I'm sure India will have a very rightful place in the world in terms of being part of the supply chain globally. So those are the positives. I would say that for the component industry, a lot more needs to be done. As I mentioned even yesterday, that the component industry requires a lot of investment because of the nature of the component industry. Typically, sales to asset ratio being almost 1:1. So if we have to reach the $300 billion target that has been set by the government, then we need to invest $100 to $150 billion in terms of investment in component manufacturing. Where is that going to come from? Particularly as my fellow panelists also said that the liquidity in the system is not adequate, and therefore the component manufacturers, which are typically MSME players, where would they get that investment from? The governments are not, the banks are not forthcoming. They ask for high collateral, which is not available with the SME sector. So something could have been done in that direction, I would assume.
Right. Mrs. Hai, big focus for India is the exports. What you've heard from the budget, does it give you enough comfort that we'll meet our targets and maybe exceed them?
In fact, we will be reaching $400 billion this year. And when I'm looking into the order booking position, we are confident that we will be further building on that. But I entirely agree with you. Indian exports have been susceptible to the growth in the global trade. And therefore, the global trade has to be robust to push our exports a lot. But I'm pretty sure that we will be having much better ecosystem when we are entering into 2022, 2023. PLI scheme will start giving more result into that. So far, we are seeing around mobile export of around $7 billion this year. I'm pretty sure under $5 to $6 billion will be added by Apple alone, and there may be other electronic sector where PLI scheme will start yielding the result. We will have better FTAs also, hopefully, at least with UK, UAE and Australia, we will be culminating either the early harvest or the full-fledged FTA. Then they will follow it by some of the regional blocks also with EU, SACU and GCC also. So, and the big thing is that the focus of the global companies have shifted onto India. And that's why I'm pretty sure that a lot of investment will flow to India also, which will provide much needed manufacturing base into the country. We have to bear in mind that it is the qualitative manufacturing only which can drive the exports on a long-term basis. And therefore, if there was an area where I'm little disappointed is the focus which has not come on the R&D. We thought that R&D and innovation will be incentivized, and globally we are seeing such kind of incentivization happening. We thought that at least for R&D 200 or 250% tax deduction may be given, particularly when we recognize that India's R&D investment is one of the lowest among our competitors. And for sustaining exports and going to the further value-added export, that is the need of the hour.
Right. Mr. Saxena, if you have to talk about the hits and the misses, particularly for MSMEs, what would that be?
Couple of things. First, the public procurement. If government can make it a paperless and hassle-free, it will be a big shot for MSMEs. Second thing is the defense. The government has reserved 68% of the budget will be spent on the domestic procurement. And this was a huge sector which MSME was waiting to tap, with definitely required R&D support. So we are seeing as a good opportunity for MSME this thing. Third thing is this emergency credit line, which has been a big relief in the terms where Mr. Sai also said the quality of the collateral has gone down during this last 2 years. So it will be a big help. And lastly, if I say, the government has announced all post office branches in the country, which will be converted, will be made a seamless connectivity with the core banking. So in practically, they'll all become a bank branches sort of thing. We have been complaining and asking the government because of the, especially the scheduled bank and the PSUs, their last mile connectivity was very poor. And MSMEs are scattered all over the country, in the villages, the small towns. So since post office has this last mile connectivity, so if they become almost like a bank branch, this will solve our long-standing demand of this. These were things. And the biggest miss was, of course, the interest subvention, which is a big cost, and we were hoping the government will, Mr. Sai said the small fund allocation around 2,300 crore had been allocated, but I'm still not sure that it will come into the interest subvention or not. This was one big miss. Plus some import duty relief, like the steel sector government has announced that they are removing the anti-dumping and CVD. But textile is a big sector in India. And you know, the second largest employment provider after agriculture. With the raw material prices gone through the roof, we are hoping that government will announce similar relief for us also in the textile, which has not been done. These are the two, basically.
Right. Last question stays the same for everyone. 1 being the lowest, 10 being the topmost score. How would you rate the budget between 1 and 10, Mr. Manwani?
Well, I would rate it at anywhere between 7 to 8. It's a forward-looking budget, and government has already done enough, and whatever steps it has taken in this budget are, I would say, in the right direction.
Right, Mr. Sahai?
I will put the budget at 8.5 to 9 because I feel that the budget is drawing a roadmap for the future. They are talking about India not only in the next 5 to 10 years, they are talking about India in 2047 and how the urbanization will take place, how we are going to address the urbanization issues. So this is a very forward-looking budget, which in fact addresses a long-term concern also. And from that perspective, I think it's a visionary budget, and therefore I will place it close to 9.
Right. Mr. Saxena, last word to you.
Being a progressive and well-meaning budget, we'll place it between 8 to 9.
Wonderful. Budget may be good in approach, but can it match in execution? For that, we have to wait. Thank you all for joining us today.